Corey was stupid athletic.
Yeah.
Corey took buckets. Corey took buckets and took fouls from people. People tried to run away from them fouls, but he didn't let them.
His game could definitely be exciting, but it wasn't always pretty. He had the athleticism to pull off some highlight reel dunks throughout his career and could definitely get his points. And he played to his strengths, which was using his solid frame and power to barrel through the defense and get trip after trip to the free throw line. He wasn't a lights-out shooter, but you still didn't want to leave him alone. And in his prime, he was a dangerous slasher. He was the size of a small forward, but had the strength and physicality to play the four if you needed, as an above-average rebounder. You couldn't say the same about him as a passer, but you put Corey Maggette on the court to get you points, not assists. And while he was a solid defender, what he really knew how to do well was sell a charge. He's become largely overlooked among the better scorers of the 2000s because so many of his points came from the line, and he made just one playoff appearance in 14 years, with him being most known for his nearly decade-long tenure with the Clippers. And even if Corey Maggette wasn't the most refined player, it can still be really fun to watch a guy barrel through the defense like a bull in a china shop. Let's jog your memory. An Illinois native, Corey Maggette's first love was baseball, but as he got older and taller, he decided to try and make a switch to basketball. And with a mixture of great work ethic and natural physical gifts, Maggette quickly began to improve. And when it came time for high school, he wanted a challenge, both athletically and academically. So he enrolled at the private school in Oak Park, in Fenwick High, where Maggette would be a starter from his freshman year on. And by the time he was a senior, he was one of the nation's top players, averaging 27 points and 10 rebounds per game, as he would earn his second consecutive parade second-team All-American selection and would be voted a McDonald's All-American, as he would play in the game and participate in the dunk contest. And when it was time for college, Maggette kept the theme of prestigious schools, as he would commit to Duke University, and would say that it was in part due to feeling a connection with Coach K, as he was also a Chicagoan. But he would admit that he was close to signing with Georgetown. But in the end, he would be giving fans a show at Cameron Indoor Stadium as part of a stacked 1999 Duke roster. Duke featured a lot of future NBA talent, as on top of Maggette, they had a sophomore Shane Battier, Elton Brand, and William Avery, as well as senior guard Trajan Langdon. And while Maggette was talented, he was raw, and would mostly play behind Battier and junior forward Chris Carrawell this year. But he was a spark plug off the bench, who could change the momentum of a game with one play due to his power and athleticism. As although he played less than 18 minutes a game, he was one of 4 players to average double figures, and did so with great efficiency. And even in his limited minutes, he was second to only Brand in free throw attempts, as his ability to get to the line would be a defining aspect of his game for his entire career. Duke was coming off an Elite 8 appearance last year and had nearly the same core returning for the 99 season, so it wasn't too surprising when they started the year ranked number 1 while winning their first 5 games. But a loss to Cincinnati in their 6th game was a little surprising. Yet after this, they played like everyone expected them to, as they would run the table the rest of the way, which included a big win over a 3rd-ranked Kentucky team and multiple wins over ACC powers like Maryland and North Carolina, as Duke was the nation's highest-scoring team, and Maggette was named to the ACC's all-freshman team, and Duke was the favorite going into the conference tourney. The quarterfinals brought Virginia, and Duke made it look easy, as they won by nearly 40 points. Then the semis versus NC State would be a little closer, but Duke would still come away victorious with a 15-point win, leading to a matchup with bitter rival North Carolina for the conference crown. But Duke continued to assert their dominance with a 23-point win to secure the ACC championship and an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament as the top-ranked team in the nation. Maggette would start in a first-round matchup with Florida A&M and would give Duke 9 points, 3 assists, a steal, and a block over 19 minutes in an easy win. The second round versus Tulsa was another easy win, yet Maggette would now come off the bench for the rest of the tournament, as he would give them 11 points, 6 boards, and 4 assists. The Sweet 16 brought Missouri State, and another double-digit win, as Maggette had 6 points and 7 rebounds. Then his signature moment of the tournament happened as the first half of an Elite 8 matchup versus Temple came to an end.
The shot with 6 seconds, no, they took it early, but Brand got inside position. Oh,
A monster putback from Maggette would give Duke extra momentum going into the half en route to a 21-point win to push them through to a Final Four matchup with Michigan State, as this would be Duke's first close game, with Maggette scoring 9 points in 17 minutes, as Duke won by 6 and were heading to a national championship matchup with UConn. Maggette's 11 minutes this game would be his lowest of the tournament, however he still gave Duke 8 points in that time. Yet, a great game ended in UConn's favor, as they won by 3, with Duke coming up just short of the title, as Maggette's freshman year ended with him averaging about 10.5 points, 4 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. But Maggette would shock a lot of people with his decision after the season. After just his freshman season, Maggette declared for the NBA draft, and while at this point it wasn't unheard of for an underclassman to leave for the NBA, it was still uncommon, and it was even more uncommon for it to be a Duke player, as the top players who attended Duke always seemed to remain for their full 4 years. And while Magette's draft declaration as a freshman who didn't even start was the most shocking, Brand and Avery, who had just finished their sophomore seasons, would also declare. But according to Maggette, he had no intention to leave school early, but he started hearing his name come up as a possible lottery pick in the '99 draft, which led to rumors that he had already made the decision to declare. And after long talks with Coach K and his own parents, Maggette realized that it was ultimately his decision. So he chose the NBA, and he seemed to have chosen right. Maggette was drafted 13th overall by the Seattle Supersonics, but was then included in a draft day deal to Orlando, as he would be kicking off his rookie season with the Magic. You could tell just by looking at him that you never had to worry about Corey Maggette being out of shape, and he would say that his conditioning was one of the first advantages he noticed that he had as a rookie. But the situation he was going to was looking like one of the worst in the NBA going into the 2000 season, as the Magic had traded away Penny Hardaway in the offseason and brought in first-year head coach Doc Rivers, so many were expecting them to finish near the bottom of the league. They had some solid veterans like Darrell Armstrong and Bo Outlaw, as well as a fourth-year Ben Wallace, who was really coming into his own. But as a rookie, Maggette would again occupy a bench role, but not as prominent of a bench role as he had had at Duke, as he would get less than 18 minutes per game this season. He would score 10 points in his NBA debut versus Chicago, which would be one of his 32 games in double figures this season, with him scoring a season-high 20 points in the January 3rd loss to Detroit. And he would also earn playing time by doing the dirty work, as he would be a solid rebounder, even recording 2 double-doubles. And in his limited minutes, his 261 free throw attempts would be second on the team. Orlando wasn't going to be challenging for a championship this season, but they were proving a lot of people wrong, as they would be the 7th highest scoring team in the league and fight their way to a 41-41 record, falling just 1 game short of the final playoff spot in the East, with Magette's rookie season ending with him averaging about 8.5 points, 4 rebounds, and 1 assist per game. But less than a year since he was traded to Orlando, he would be on the move again. The LA Clippers had been busy on draft night, as they had picked up Darius Miles and Quentin Richardson in the draft, but would also complete a trade with Orlando, which saw them receive the draft rights to Keon Dooling and the second-year Maggette, as all this young talent would be joining second-year forward Lamar Odom as one of the highest potential teams in the league. But even in this new situation, Maggette saw his role remain quite similar under head coach Alvin Gentry, as although he saw a slight minutes increase, he was still coming off the bench. But the productivity was there, as he upped all of his numbers in less than 2 extra minutes per game, as one of 4 players on the team to average double figures, while finishing second to Odom in made and attempted free throws. And while he wasn't going to get a full opportunity in the offense this season, he did get a chance to grow his name among the fans when he was selected as a participant in the NBA Slam Dunk Contest. And even though he didn't win, he kicked it off with a bang. The Clippers were still a ways away from being competitive, sitting at 16-34 at the All-Star break, and Magette's season would come to an early end due to a groin injury for a Clippers team who finished at 31-51 and missed the playoffs, as Magette's second season had seen him average about 10 points, 4 rebounds, and an assist per game. But when the 02 season started, it would be a Duke reunion. The Clippers had pulled off one of the biggest moves of the offseason in acquiring Elton Brand from Chicago to add to their young core, which included his former Duke teammate in Maggette. Unfortunately, an optimistic Clippers team would be held back due to injury and suspension issues with Odom, with Maggette also falling victim to injury, After an 0-3 start, with Maggette coming off the bench, he was placed in the starting lineup and scored double figures in 5 of his next 6, including a season-high 28 points in a November 15th loss to Toronto. And as the season went on, he was establishing himself as one of the Clippers' better scorers, while often being tasked with guarding the other team's best wing player, as he would see his scoring rise for the 3rd straight season. But during a February 21st loss to Orlando, Maggette would suffer dislocations to 2 fingers on his shooting hand, after pounding the scorer's table out of frustration, as he missed over a month. The Clippers would play well without him, and overall were staying afloat this season. And although they showed further improvement, their 39-43 record was not enough for a playoff berth, as Maggette finished with averages of about 11.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. But the Clippers looked like 2003 would be the year they broke into the playoffs. Darius Miles had been traded, but in return the Clippers received one of the league's best young point guards in Andre Miller. But Miller would be the only one who could stay healthy this season, as Odom, Brand, Richardson, and Maggette each missed at least 18 games. After just a few games, Maggette began dealing with swelling to his knee, but he would try to play through it, even recording 30 points in a November 20th loss to Sacramento. But about a week later, he would be put on the injured list as he had torn cartilage in his knee and required surgery, which would keep him out for a month. But with all the injuries that LA was dealing with, it gave Maggette more opportunity and less players to split minutes with when he was healthy, as this season would see him take a big step forward, putting up then career highs in scoring, rebounding, assists, and steals, as he was even the team's 2nd leading scorer, and would finish top 10 in most improved player voting. But all the injuries the Clippers dealt with were just too much, as after 58 games they were 19-39, before Alvin Gentry was fired and replaced with Dennis Johnson. Yet under Johnson, the Clippers would win just 8 more games, to finish with a 27-55 record and miss the playoffs, as Maggette's season had seen him average about 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. But Maggette's opportunity would continue to increase, and he would continue to make the most of it. Maggette was a restricted free agent and had accepted an offer sheet from Utah, but LA matched it, as they locked up Maggette for 6 years and about $40 million. Lamar Odom had signed with Miami in free agency, while Miller had inked a deal with Denver. And although the Clippers had lost a lot of the young talent they had just a few years earlier, new head coach Mike Dunleavy didn't have to worry as much about juggling minutes. Yet one player who would get plenty of minutes was Maggette, as he would get a then career-high 36 minutes a night while playing his most games since his rookie year, and it would translate into him leading the Clippers in scoring on a then career-high average, while also acting as their 3rd leading rebounder on then career highs. And while Maggette had always been one of the best on the Clippers at getting to the line, this year he would show he was one of the best in the NBA, as his 620 free throw attempts would be the 3rd highest in the league, with his 526 makes being the most in the NBA. He would hit double figures in 67 games, including 7 with at least 30, as well as 5 double-doubles, and would score at least 10 points from the charity stripe in 19 games. But winning was still eluding the Clippers. Offense wasn't a problem, as they were top 10 in the NBA in scoring, but this wasn't enough to make up for a bottom 3 defense, as they finished with a 28-54 record and again missed the playoffs, as Maggette's breakout year had seen him average about 20.5 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. Richardson had left in free agency, which was a big hit to their offense, as he had been their 3rd leading scorer last year. Luckily, the Clippers would get a great year from Bobby Simmons, who would make up for most of the lost scoring. And Maggette continued to quietly be one of the league's better point producers, marking his 6th consecutive season with an increased scoring average at a career-high 22.2 points per game, which would again lead the team, while also putting up career highs in rebounding and assists, and averaging at least a steal for the first time in his career. However, his 43.1% shooting would be a then career low, but over a third of his points came from the free throw line, as he averaged 10 attempts per game while making them at an 85.7% clip, which was also a career high, once again finishing top 10 in both attempts and makes this year. Maggette began the season on a tear, scoring double figures in each of his first 37 games. And over the course of the entire season, he would have 12 games with at least 30 points and 10 double-doubles, which included a career-high 19 rebounds to go along with 25 points in a November 8th loss to Detroit. And from the free throw line, he would have 27 games making at least 10 free throws. But these 2000s Clippers teams just never seemed to be able to stay fully healthy, as second-year center Chris Kaman would miss 19 games, and knee and shoulder issues would limit rookie point guard Sean Livingston to 30 games. And then Maggette would be shut down near the end of the season due to a torn ligament in his wrist, as the Clippers improved, but still finished at just 37-45 and missed the playoffs, with Maggette's career year seeing him average about 22 points, 6 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. The 2006 season would finally see the Clippers go in the right direction, yet Maggette wouldn't be as involved in it as he would have liked. Kaman and Livingston were healthier this year, and the Clippers had gone out and got themselves a much more experienced backcourt after trading for Sam Cassell and signing Cuttino Mobley. A hamstring injury would keep Maggette out of the team's first 4 games, but when he returned, he looked like his usual self, putting up almost 22 a night on improved efficiency from last year. But then in a December 5th defeat of Miami, he would land awkwardly and injure his foot. Initially, this was thought to be a sprain, until a CT scan revealed ligament damage, leading to him missing nearly 3 months, as he wouldn't make his return until March 3rd. But interestingly, had he not injured his foot, he may not have been a Clipper anymore, as reportedly LA was in talks with Indiana to acquire their disgruntled defensive stopper Ron Artest, with Maggette going to Indiana. But the Pacers ended those talks due to their concerns over Maggette's foot. So Maggette was back on the court for a Clippers team sitting at 33-23. And over his next 22 games, he would ease his way back into his usual workload, mostly coming off the bench for the team. But then in early April, a herniated disc in his back would again keep him out of 7 of the team's final 8 games, as he only managed 32 games on the year. But the Clippers managed 47 wins, as they were finally making a playoff appearance, with Maggette acting as a 6th man throughout the postseason. The first round brought Denver, and over his first 2 games, Maggette was averaging just 10 points on about 35% shooting. Yet LA would win both, but over his next 3, he was an X-factor for the Clippers, as he came off the bench to average nearly 22 points on over 51% shooting, while doing his usual work of drawing fouls, as he would drop 23 points in 2 of his next 3, and would sink a postseason career-high 11 free throws in Game 4. And after dropping Game 3, the Clippers came back to win the next 2 and the series, pushing themselves through to a second-round matchup with Phoenix. Maggette started the second round strong, with 20 points on 7 of 11 shooting in Game 1, yet the Clippers lost. He had just 2 points in Game 2, but wasn't needed, as LA won in a blowout. Although he had just 7 points in Game 3, he would add a postseason career-high 15 rebounds. But the Clippers fell behind 2-1. He would start Game 4 and give his best postseason performance of his career, with 18 points and 14 rebounds, while making all 8 of his free throw attempts in a win to even the series. Then after an inefficient 8-point performance in a Game 5 loss, he returned to the bench for Game 6, and helped the Clippers stay alive by dropping a postseason career-high 25 points on 7 of 8 shooting, while going 9 for 9 from the free throw line in a win, as it would come down to Game 7. And although Maggette had 18 points and 9 boards, he shot just 5 of 13 in a blowout loss to end LA's year, as Maggette's injury-filled season had ended with him averaging about 18 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. But little did Maggette know, that would be his first and last time experiencing the postseason. Dunleavy liked the scoring and rebounding that Maggette was bringing off the bench throughout the playoffs, so when the 07 season started, Maggette was still in that role, spending the majority of the first half of the year as the team's 6th man, yet he would still act as their 2nd leading scorer and 3rd leading rebounder. Over his first 44 games, he was giving the team good production off the bench, and the Clippers were doing just as much winning as they were losing, sitting at 24-24 after 48 games. Then after sitting out a couple games, Maggette came back primarily in a starting role for the remainder of the season, showing good increases in his production, and with a much healthier year, which saw him play the 2nd most games of his career at 75, he would return to being among the league's best at reaching and converting at the free throw line. And although he would have just one 30-point game, it was his career high, when he went for 39 points on 10 of 15 from the field and 17 of 24 from the free throw line in an April 12th defeat of the Lakers. And while Maggette had one of his healthiest years, the same couldn't be said for all of the team, as Cassell missed 24 games and Livingston would suffer a horrible knee injury after playing 54 games, leading to the Clippers failing to reach last year's win total or even turn in a winning season, as their 40-42 record was not enough for a playoff berth, with Maggette's season seeing him average about 17 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. Maggette would be a starter from the beginning of this season, but they were missing their best starter, as Brand had ruptured his Achilles during the offseason and would only return to play the final 8 games of this year. Chris Kaman had a good year, but missed 26 games. Maggette had his best season in years out of necessity, as the scoring needed to come from somewhere, and Maggette would lead the team while finishing as a top 3 rebounder, and again being one of the league's best at getting to and converting at the line. He would hit double figures in 68 games and record 8 games with at least 30, while adding 6 double-doubles and 24 games with at least 10 made free throws. And while the Clippers could rely on Maggette's scoring, they couldn't rely on much else, as their roster missed over 300 games collectively, and Dunleavy fielded nearly 40 different starting lineups. So it wasn't too surprising when LA finished with a 23-59 record and again missed the playoffs, as Maggette's year had seen him average about 22 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. But after 8 years with the Clippers, Maggette would opt out of the final year of his deal, making him a free agent. In early July, Maggette signed a 5-year deal with Golden State, believed to be worth around $50 million, as a way to replace some of the scoring lost with the departure of Baron Davis, who had gone on to sign with the Clippers. The Warriors were coming off a couple unexpected years of success after making it to the second round of the playoffs in 2007, then although they missed the playoffs in 2008, they racked up 48 wins in a competitive Western Conference. The Warriors featured good wing players in Steven Jackson and Monta Ellis, but an ankle sprain to Ellis kept him out for most of the season. And to make up for this, the Warriors made an early season trade for Jamal Crawford. And while Maggette's downhill style of play seemed like a great fit in Don Nelson's fast-paced offense, he would have a disappointing 2009 due to injuries. Over the course of the season, he would deal with injuries to his hamstring and his hand, as well as a concussion, leading to him appearing in just 51 games and only starting 19 of them. He was a full-time starter over his first 16 games, and while the efficiency wasn't quite there, his production was about the same as it had been in LA. But after tearing his hamstring in early December, he returned in early January and came off the bench for most of his remaining games. However, this seemed like a good fit, as his numbers didn't drop too much and his efficiency greatly improved. But with Maggette, Jackson, Crawford, and Ellis each missing over 20 games, the Warriors regressed and finished with just a 29-53 record and missed the playoffs, with Maggette's season seeing him average about 18.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Ellis was healthier in 2010, and the Warriors had added a sharpshooting point guard through the draft out of Davidson. And they would pull off another big early season trade when they sent Jackson to the Bobcats. Maggette had wrist surgery over the offseason and began the season again coming off the bench. And over his first 23 games, he was producing well in that role. Then in mid-December, Nelson would put Maggette into the starting lineup, but he was often playing Maggette at the 4 due to his rebounding ability, as now the Warriors could push the pace, playing small ball, and Maggette would excel over the remainder of the season as a starter, as he was averaging nearly 22 points per game on some of his best shooting splits, while again returning to the league's top 10 in free throw makes and attempts, and his overall season would see him hit double figures in 66 games, including 8 with at least 30 and 5 double-doubles, as he would be the team's second leading scorer. Unfortunately, while the Warriors continue to be one of the league's most high-powered offenses, they were its worst defense for the second consecutive season, leading to just a 26-56 finish. As Maggette's year ended with him averaging about 20 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game, but the rest of Maggette's career going forward would see him on the move often. In late June, Maggette headlined a package sent to Milwaukee, as the Bucks were in search of more scoring after a surprising playoff appearance last year, which saw them feature one of the league's stingiest defenses, yet one of its worst offenses. Maggette joined a Bucks team with some solid pieces, like big man Andrew Bogut and second-year guard Brandon Jennings, with a now 31-year-old Maggette also acting as a veteran presence. Yet similar to his time in Golden State, Maggette's role would be undefined throughout the season, with the Bucks' slow-paced approach being a huge adjustment for Maggette after coming from Golden State. He began the year in a bench role, but would see his minutes drop significantly, and in turn his production. Then he would be a starter for about a month, and showed much better production and efficiency, with the Bucks going 6-10 over that period. But after sitting out a game, he returned to a bench role where he stayed for the remainder of the season, and saw further decline in his minutes and his production, as by season's end, he had fallen out of favor with head coach Scott Skiles, logging DNPs in 7 of the team's final 20 games, as the Bucks finished at 35-47 and missed the playoffs. with Maggette's year ending with him averaging about 12 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. But when the lockout-shortened 2012 season began, Maggette would be suiting up for a team who made history for how bad they were. A 3-team trade on draft day would see Maggette wind up with the Charlotte Bobcats, joining a team who now featured rookies Kemba Walker and Bismack Biyombo, and had another Duke alum as their top returning player, in Gerald Henderson. And while it was hoped that Maggette could return to his form of a few years earlier, he would instead deal with a season filled with injury. Maggette began the season as a starter, but after 6 games he went down with a hamstring injury, which kept him sidelined for the following 19 games. Once he returned, he was giving the Bobcats some scoring and rebounding, but he was shooting below 39% from the field. And then in late March, he would strain his Achilles. And even though he came back and tried to play through it, he was eventually shut down for the rest of the season in mid-April, while the Bobcats were in the midst of a 23-game losing streak to end their season, as their 7-59 finish would set an NBA record for the worst single-season winning percentage of all time, with Maggette's year seeing him average about 15 points, 4 rebounds, and 1 assist per game. But yet again, Maggette was on the move over the offseason, as a late June trade would see him end up in Detroit. But this would be the most frustrating season of his career. Maggette would miss the team's first 8 games as he was recovering from a calf injury, with the Pistons losing all 8 of them. Then over his next 18, he was playing but getting limited minutes and struggling to find his groove, as Detroit went 7-11 in that time. But then, head coach Lawrence Frank would bench Maggette in mid-December, with speculation being that it was due to pressure on Frank to play for the future, with Frank saying that he wanted to give the younger guys a chance and evaluate what they had. But the benching wasn't temporary, as after playing 16 minutes in a December 15th loss to Indiana, he never played again this season. And while this would clearly be frustrating for Maggette, he handled it like a true professional, never speaking poorly about anyone else involved, as the Pistons finished the year at 29-53 and missed the playoffs, with Maggette's year seeing him average about 5.5 points, 1.5 rebounds, and 1 assist per game. Maggette's contract was up, and shortly before training camp started, he would sign with the San Antonio Spurs. But after appearing in just 2 preseason games for the team, he was released just a couple weeks later, and would then retire shortly after. He would spend time as an analyst, then make a return to basketball in 2017, with Ice Cube's Big 3 League, yet he would tear his Achilles in his opening game. However, he would work his way back to be the league's MVP and win the championship the following year. Then after playing 1 more season for the Power, he would finally walk away from basketball on his own terms. Corey Maggette will go down as one of the more forgotten scorers of the 2000s, in an era defined by some of the best scorers and wing players the league has ever seen. It's easy for Maggette to become overlooked, as he was never on the level of a Kobe or a T-Mac, but he could score efficiently and get to the line at will, and that may also be a part of the reason why he's even less talked about than some of the other 20-point-per-game guys of that era, because he didn't score the bulk of his points from the field. He scored them from the free throw line, and people don't tend to remember free throws. He played reckless and didn't care about his body taking a beating, which definitely led to him missing more games than you would have liked. But when you're built like Corey Maggette, you'd be dumb not to use your body. The biggest knock on him will always be that he rarely played on winning teams. But the Clippers were hit with so many injuries during his best years. Then his later years were spent with teams who wouldn't have done a lot of winning no matter how good he played. And at the end of the day, Corey Maggette is just a guy who put his head down, worked hard, and never shied away from the physicality of the game. And it led to him being a very good NBA player for over a decade. But that's it for today's episode on Corey Maggette. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on his Blue Devils and Clippers teammate, or this one on a player who briefly coached him in LA. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.